Introductions. My name is Billy Gallagher. I was class of 2014, editor-in-chief of volume 242, and I'm now a graduate student at the Stanford Graduate School of Business.
My name is Josh Hayner. I'm a staff photographer and the senior editor for photo technology at the New York Times, and I was class of 02 at Stanford.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ann Grimes. I am a member of the Daily Board, and here at Stanford, I'm Associate Director of the Brown Institute for Media Innovation, which is in the School of Engineering.
I'm Nick Thompson. I am the editor-in-chief of Wired. I was a columnist for the Daily in 1996 and in the ASSU, so I was at war with the Daily in 1997.
Fantastic. So I think to kick things off, it's so interesting to think about new technology platforms from Facebook to Twitter to Snapchat. And when they emerge, we have journalists, advertisers, readers, all these people rushing in to sort of put a flag in the ground. But these things don't always work out, particularly for journalists, and they're not always profitable. So how do you all think about entering a new technology space, whether it's social media, whether it's even going back to the first time printing online? How do you think about, as a newsroom, entering this and making it a space that you, one, can produce quality journalism, and two, can actually make money?
Is that weird? You're looking at me. All right. That's like one of the existential and hardest questions that we face. And it was like the central thing I did at the New Yorker, which was where I worked before I worked at Wired. So the question you ask is, you say, okay, what is essential? What is a New Yorker piece? What does it mean? What is a Wired piece? What does it mean? And can I translate that in some way to the platform? Whether you're talking about Snapchat, whether you're talking about Google Play, whether you're talking about Apple News. Like, can you translate enough of the essential identity to it? So that's kind of question one. If you can't, then forget about it. If you can, that's a good start. Second question, can you actually build it? Do you have the dev resources? Like, what is the amount of time and effort? Like, you sort of always underappreciate the amount of like technological expertise and work it will take. Then the third thing is, what is the business model going to be? Is it going to help me sell subscriptions? Is it going to help me sell ads? Is there some other way I can do it? Or is it just a like loss leader because it's where new readers are and we have to reach them? So like on Snapchat, we got a guy who knows a lot about Snapchat here. So I came on board at Wired, and one of the first questions I was asked is, do you want to start a Snapchat channel? So, okay, that's a hard thing to think about. It's not going to give us any subscriptions, right? There's no subscribe mechanism. I really believe that subscriptions are the future of journalism, particularly high-quality journalism. So, I don't know. But we do create certain things for social media that kind of would work on Snapchat. And also, if you look at the growth of social media platforms in the world, the only one at that point that was growing that wasn't owned by Facebook was Snapchat. So if you want to kind of diversify and not live in a world where Mark Zuckerberg has the chance to put his boot on your throat on everything that matters to you, you got to kind of go into Snapchat. So you're at least in like one place that's growing that he doesn't control. So that was how we made the decision, like a bunch of factors that went into it. And Wired has a Snapchat channel. It's great. You should all look at it. It's really cool.
So I think this is probably a little bit like being in the circus, where you've got a million plates and you're trying to keep them all in the air at the same time. I'm not in a newsroom, so these two are better equipped to answer the specifics on this, but I would say that the trick for probably both of them is to hire the right people who have the right mindset, who are willing to experiment, because whether it's Snapchat today or something else tomorrow, it's going to flip in 24 months. And if you don't have a newsroom full of people who are eager to adopt new technologies and experiment with new technologies, and know when to step in and when to step back with the permission of their bosses, you'll be stuck.
The New York Times released a report called the 2020 report a couple years ago, and one of the big takeaways that I had from it was we encouraged our company to hire more technologically minded people, so journalists that also had a knowledge of engineering or computer science, just to sort of fill out, to be these developers and people that have that breadth of talent. For me, I was a symbolic systems major at Stanford and a studio art major, just because there was no undergrad degree in journalism. So that overlap in the early 2000s really became important in my career. And starting at the Times as a 25-year-old in a very established newsroom, those technological skills definitely allowed myself to sort of be apart from the rest of the newsroom because there weren't a lot of people coming in with that kind of technological background, and that's who I'm looking to hire now going forward.
And Nick, you talked about wanting to diversify away from Facebook as a reason why Snapchat Discover is appealing. How do you think about, or how should any newsroom think about working with these tech companies that have so much power, whether Facebook, Google, Twitter, Snapchat? It's so few that control your relationship with your readers. How do you think about working with them while remaining independent?
It's one of the hardest questions, right? So let's talk about Facebook. So Facebook is the number one source of traffic to us, right? So it drives more traffic every day. Facebook advertising is probably the fundamental mechanism we'll use to generate subscriptions. Certainly it was the number one subscription driver at The New Yorker. It's the most important story that we cover, and they often do things that we hate, right? And in fact, we have a bunch of writers saying they should be broken up, right? So that's pretty complicated. Google, number two source of traffic to us, actively working with us in a whole bunch of things where we partner with them to like build apps and build projects, run ad networks that we use and actually like are deeply tied together in advertising structure, buy advertisements in Wired Magazine, and then also do all kinds of things that we cover and report on. And we're like messing with them all the time. In fact, there was a Wired reporter who shut down the Google All Hands thing by leaking their internal documents, right, when the James Damore thing broke. So we're like constantly messing with them, constantly making them angry, and yet utterly dependent on them. So these relationships are really complicated, and they're particularly complicated for me because I also like to report and write. So as soon as this ends, I'm going over to Facebook where I'm working on a story. So how do you balance that? You just have to trust that you can write the harshest, meanest, fairest, most accurate things that you possibly can, and then pray that they don't screw you, or if they do screw you, that then you then expose it. And I don't think there's any other way to do it. You just have to make sure everybody knows, like, we have business relationships, they're complicated, they're traffic relationships, they're complicated, but none of that can ever, even 1/100% get in the way of your pursuit of truth and accuracy. And you just gotta pursue those ideals. And if there ever is a collision, or if there ever is a reporter who's like, I shouldn't write that because it's going to script the advertising relationship, then you fire the reporter. You tell him you can't do that. So it's a really hard thing to do, but you've got to just hold truth and accuracy as the number one thing, even if it means really pissing off people upon whom you're financially beholden.
So is that firewall a virtual firewall kind of, or is it something ingrained in the lines nowadays?
It's complicated. Yes, it is. It is ingrained, virtual, and structurally set up. Right? We do set up mechanisms so that the writers who are covering these places have never had anything to do with not only the people who are making the business decisions, but like they're not even edited by the people making the business decisions. So we set up walls to minimize any chance of conflict. But then there are people like me who are kind of like, I'm editor-in-chief and I'm writing, so I'm kind of mixed up in it. So I gotta deal with my God and my overseers.
Do they put pressure on you actually? Do they divert traffic or do something nefarious like that?
Well, no. Twitter did. Twitter removed the New Yorker wrote a critical story about Twitter and was removed from the Twitter recommendation algorithm. And that cost the New Yorker millions of Twitter followers. Now, was that done to the critical story? I never had anybody say it was done because of that, right? But that's a lot of traffic and readership. And was that, maybe it was accidental, maybe it was coincidental, maybe it was like deeply evil, maybe it was a junior person. Like, I don't know. I've asked the founders of Twitter and they're like, oh, we have no, we would never do that, right? I don't know. I've never, we'll see. It would be a massive scandal, and it would be horrible, and it might well happen.
With an algorithm, how do you actually know if you're just one of these other people who doesn't really understand what writing an algorithm so complex really entails?
Yeah, they will always have deniability. Oh, I don't know, we didn't know. But one day, like if we write a story about it's critical of Mark Zuckerberg, and the next day our traffic drops 40%, a pretty good indication, but that's probably not the way it would happen.
Eric, you covered Facebook a lot. Did you have something to chime in there?
Well, Twitter just done it to other people like TechCrunch, and now there's some suggested user list days, and then it's all manually decided.
Uh-huh.
So I think it's probably manual.
I was trying to hedge it, man. I was trying not to say anything, but then I had that stupid pregnant pause. Anyway.
So let me add two thoughts to this. I teach a class here at Stanford in media and entrepreneurship, and one of the things that I hear from folks who come and talk to my class is, as Nick just said, there's this sort of push-pull relationship between publishers and the platforms. And so, for example, with the New York Times, I think we've seen you get caught between in the crosshairs here, and of course you have to play ball with the platforms because they have the traffic, as Nick just said. But what the New York Times has done is sort of pulled back from, for a while they were sitting sort of on the cyber fence, but have pulled back and are trying to steer users like you to them and change the revenue model, as Jay and others probably spoke about in the last panel, so that they are more reliant on reader revenue. And so they become a destination and people are going directly to them as opposed to over the platforms. That's a complicated dynamic, but one that we're seeing change, especially over the last couple of years. The second thing I would say is, especially in the last 18 months, we are seeing computer scientists and researchers come out of the corners and try to make and report on the algorithms and the fake news and who's going where and why. And while they haven't coalesced yet into a consumer protection movement, sort of a Ralph Nader type movement that we saw with cars, or the food nutrition movement, I suspect that we will see that fairly soon. There are folks like Tristan Harris, who is a young graduate of our computer science program here, who has launched a movement called Time Well Spent, and he is calling for more accountability on the part of the tech companies. We are seeing young researchers like Nate Matthias of the MIT Media Lab also stepping forward to play in this space and get more accountability so that we better understand how the algorithms are working and when they're falling short and when they are twisting things around. And these researchers are starting to put pressure on the platforms to open up more so that they can have access, even with NDAs, to their data, so that they can work to solve some of the problems that we've seen recently with fake news, because clearly the companies themselves can't do it alone.
Yeah, I'd like to expand on something Anne said, which is at the Times, our model is really about subscriptions right now and about giving you something that's very unique that you can only get at the Times, where we're seeing our strength in curation. And one of those things is what I work with, which is our technology, and trying to give you very innovative ways of presenting storytelling to you that you can only find at the Times. And that is a value add for us. And so in my position, I started out with a very fundamental question I wanted to address. I wanted to figure out how I could go to the Oscars, go to the Met Gala, go to a Super Bowl, and the Olympics. And so I looked at technological problems in the way we've treated our photography in these major events and tried to figure out how we could do something novel to get you pictures faster. So at the Academy Awards, I came up with a way of our photographers working on the red carpet and going direct to Instagram and Twitter cards, so that when you were following our live coverage, we were the first on Instagram and Twitter with the dress, who made it, and those kind of very basic things that nobody else was doing. And that brought people to our site to get something that we had built with our archive of photography in the library of Oscars red carpets over the years. So you could go from year 1994 to the present and see every dress that everybody wore, sort by color, by designer, and it was a very kind of algorithmic approach to our photography. And we took that same technology and shrunk it and I built a tiny backpack that we started sending around to events, to live events, in order to send pictures very quickly to our editors. So debuted that at a Super Bowl, and at the Super Bowl there was a power outage, very famously, and so nobody could get pictures out during the power outage except our backpack that was connected to cellular networks that did not go down, and we made deadline with a picture of the players sitting on the field looking distracted and depressed. And so then shrunk that even more into a fanny pack that we then took to the Olympics and decided to take it one step further to be able to send from the camera directly to a published live slideshow on the homepage of the New York Times and on our mobile app. So my photography from a gymnastics meet was immediately, as the event was going on, published before the event was over in real time on our site. So we're trying to give our readers something very unique through our technology.
Cool. Josh is going to be giving out New York Times fanny packs at the cocktail hour. So stay around. Every time a new platform comes along, it has the potential to disrupt and change the business models for journalism. When you look at some of the emerging technologies, whether it's blockchain, artificial intelligence, autonomous vehicles, which one do you believe will have the greatest impact on journalism, and do you think it'll be positive or negative?
That's not a fair question.
Yeah, it's a tough one to anticipate the future in that way. I mean, we had a research and innovation lab at the Times when I started, and they were building a mirror that talked to you and read you your news in the morning. This was about 5 years ago. We recently shut down our R&D lab because we thought they were thinking too far in the future and maybe in impractical ways, and they should be looking at actual technology as platforms, the way you just said.
Better than the mirror was the stove. So, do you remember the stove? They had a stove there that they called Julia in honor of Julia Child, and the stove was a precursor to a smart stove, which would be armed with Times recipes, and it would tell you. It would be programmed how to cook. So if something was to be simmered or something was to be boiled, the recipe would connect with the stove. It was the answer to the Times' business model problem. Because if they could only have joined up with GE and put that on every stove in America, there would be no revenue problems.
None at all.
So I will say that probably the second most important thing to hit journalism after the smart stove will be artificial intelligence. Will be artificial intelligence. So, right, what's going to happen is we're going to use artificial intelligence, possibly combined with quantum computing and incredible data sets, and we're going to create computers that are better at basically every task than humans at what we do. And so you can already see this starting to creep into journalism. It's going to creep into every field. So the Washington Post has, AI neural net machines that write sports stories, right? Because sports stories are pretty easy, right? The Orioles beat the Red Sox 4-3, and it's because Manny Machado did this, right? Like, you can extract that from like little strips of data. But each year, due to the wonders of exponential growth and the law of accelerating returns, it is going to get faster. It's going to get better, and it's going to get better at rates we can't comprehend. So the first step is you're going to be able to write very simple things. You're also going to be able to, do like sort of super high-powered editing, like grammar editing. And eventually, as you kind of move up the cognitive chain, like, you'll start wiping away professions that are lower in the cognitive chain. So if you want to survive as a journalist, you kind of have to both learn how to work with technology and sort of move yourself up the chain. So I think all professions are going to be shaken up by this. Journalism's no different. And then the question is whether more jobs survive at the end, right? Or fewer jobs survive. Or, it's like a long transition process, but like whether jobs start getting destroyed or whether jobs start getting added, right? So the general relationship of humans and technology is that as technological change comes, it creates more jobs, right? And we get scared of it, and we think that the internal combustion engine is gonna like get rid of all the people who drive the horses, but it doesn't. But in general, it gets better. But there's always a risk that it will be different this time, right? And now it's not just robots that can like lift things, and not just robots who can do sort of brute force intellectual tasks like multiplying 6-digit numbers. Now it's actually, computers that can think. And maybe that's fundamentally different. And there's like an optimism camp that says we'll be good. There's like an elation camp which says we'll actually merge with the machines and live forever. I interviewed Ray Kurzweil last week. And then there's like a like slightly pessimistic camp, which is like, we're all screwed. We might as well just have universal basic income and the world will become Saudi Arabia. So
Which camp do you fall into?
I'm in the optimistic camp. So somewhere between despair and Kurzweil, probably like 3/4 of the way to Kurzweil. But like, it's going to change every profession massively, including journalism.
And it already has. So, as Nick said, we're seeing companies like Narrative Science pop up that are doing this kind of robo-reporting. And then large media organizations like the Associated Press adopting these techniques in addition to the Washington Post. So whether it's a sports story where they can quickly get the sports data out and pour it into the algorithmic mix and the sports story comes out, or an earnings story, that's already happening. And I think the Associated Press has documented that it's faster, it's better. Well, it's faster, it's cheaper. Whether it's better or not remains to be determined, and that the coverage of the stock market has expanded as a result of this.
Do they even call an analyst for comment? Story?
They call it an AI that works for the analyst for comment. So it's a computer calling a computer.
Eric,
And we're seeing computer scientists experiment on this in other venues. We at the Brown Institute funded a project on joke writing. So how could you automatically write jokes? So it's expanding beyond news.
I mean,
Are
so
they
it's
any
not-
good? The jokes? Are they any good?
No.
Depends on your perspective. Depends on your sense of humor.
Humor is actually hard for robots. It's a harder thing to crack than some other problems.
How's the delivery?
Very flat.